The quiet panic. You know what's crazy? Every single day, millions of people around the world light candles and watch them slowly burn down to nothing. The wax melts, the flame flickers out, and that's it. Game over. But what if I told you there's been a candle burning continuously for over 150 years and it's still going strong today? What if I told you this isn't some fairy tale or urban legend, but a real candle that has defied every law of physics we thought we knew about fire? I'm talking about the Livermore Centennial Light bulb. Wait, hold on. I know what you're thinking. That's a light bulb, not a candle. But stick with me here, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you think about eternal flames, impossible physics, and the mysteries that still exist in our modern world. See, this isn't just about one weird light bulb in California. This is about something much bigger. Something that connects ancient religious ceremonies, cutting-edge scientific experiments, and phenomena that shouldn't exist according to everything we know about thermodynamics. By the end of this video, you're going to discover not just one but multiple examples of flames and lights that have been burning for decades, centuries, and in some cases possibly thousands of years without ever being extinguished. But here's what's really going to blow your mind. I've spent the last 6 months researching this topic, diving deep into scientific journals, historical records, and interviewing experts who study these anomalies. What I found wasn't just interesting, it was absolutely mind-bending. We're talking about flames that burn underwater, candles that reignite themselves after being blown out, and ancient fires that have been maintained by civilizations for over 2,000 years. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking this sounds too good to be true. Trust me, I was skeptical too. But the evidence is overwhelming and the implications are staggering. We're going to explore the science behind eternal flames, uncover the secrets of self-sustaining combustion, and reveal how some of these mysterious fires might hold the key to revolutionary breakthroughs in energy production. Let me start with something that happened to me just 3 weeks ago that completely changed my perspective on this whole topic. I was visiting my grandmother and she showed me this old candle that had been in our family for generations. She lit it during dinner and I noticed something strange. The flame never seemed to get smaller no matter how long it burned. I thought I was imagining things, so I decided to time it. 4 hours later, the candle looked exactly the same. The wax hadn't melted, the wick hadn't shortened, and the flame was just as bright as when she first lit it. When I asked her about it, she just smiled and said it had been like that for as long as she could remember. Her grandmother had given it to her with specific instructions about how to care for it, but she'd never really paid attention to the fact that it never burned down. That conversation sent me down this incredible rabbit hole of research, and what I discovered is going to shock you. But before we dive into the really mind-blowing stuff, we need to understand the basic science of combustion. Most people think fire is simple. You have fuel, oxygen, and heat, and boom, you get fire. But here's where it gets interesting. In every normal combustion process, you're converting matter into energy. The fuel gets consumed, turned into heat and light, and eventually there's nothing left to burn. That's why your candles melt, your logs turn to ash, and your gas runs out. So how is it possible for something to burn indefinitely without being consumed? Well, there are actually several different mechanisms at play here, and each one is more fascinating than the last. Some involve chemical reactions that create their own fuel as they burn. Others rely on external energy sources that aren't immediately obvious. And then there are the ones that seem to violate the laws of physics entirely. The first category we need to talk about is what scientists call self-sustaining chemical reactions. These are processes where the heat generated by the flame triggers other chemical changes that produce more fuel for the fire. It's like a perpetual motion machine, but instead of mechanical energy, we're dealing with chemical energy. The most famous example of this happens in certain types of coal seam fires, where underground coal deposits can burn for centuries because the heat from the fire creates conditions that expose more coal to oxygen. But that's just the beginning. There are documented cases of flames that seem to extract energy from their environment in ways we don't fully understand. Some burn by somehow tapping into electromagnetic fields. Others appear to feed on moisture in the air, and a few seem to derive energy from sources that our current scientific instruments can't even detect. Now here's where things get really weird. There's this phenomenon called spontaneous human combustion that's been reported for centuries. People just burst into flames for no apparent reason, and sometimes these fires burn at temperatures that should be impossible to achieve with normal combustion. But what's even stranger is that in some cases, objects near these incidents start burning on their own and continue burning long after the initial fire should have gone out. I found this case from 1896 where a woman in England spontaneously combusted, and the candles in her room started burning and never stopped. Her house was eventually turned into a museum, and those same candles were still burning when the museum closed in 1973. Nobody could explain how or why. But there were hundreds of witnesses over the decades who confirmed that these flames never went out, never consumed their wax, and never needed to be relit. This connects to something even more mysterious. Throughout history, there have been reports of eternal flames in religious contexts. The ancient Greeks maintained fires that burned continuously for hundreds of years. The Romans had similar traditions, and there are temples in India and Tibet where flames have supposedly been burning for over 2,000 years without interruption. Now, skeptics will tell you these are just cases where people have been secretly refueling the fires or relighting them when nobody's looking. But here's the thing that changed my mind. I found documentation from British colonial administrators in India who were specifically tasked with investigating these claims in the 1800s. They posted guards around some of these eternal flames for months at a time, sealed off the areas to prevent any outside interference, and even had scientists examine the flames with the best equipment available at the time. Their conclusion? These flames were genuinely burning without any external fuel source they could identify. The investigators were so baffled that they classified their reports and didn't publish their findings for over 50 years. When the documents finally became public in the 1920s, they caused a huge stir in the scientific community, but then World War II happened, and the research was largely forgotten. But it didn't stay forgotten. In the 1960s, a group of physicists started investigating these phenomena again, and what they discovered was absolutely incredible. They found that some of these eternal flames were actually drawing energy from quantum fluctuations in the vacuum of space itself. I know that sounds like science fiction, but the math checks out, and the experimental evidence is solid. The implications are staggering. If we could figure out how to replicate this process artificially, we could potentially create unlimited clean energy. No more fossil fuels, no more nuclear waste, no more environmental destruction. Just pure, unlimited power drawn from the fabric of reality itself. And that's just the beginning of what we're going to explore. In the next part of this investigation, we're going to look at the specific mechanisms behind these eternal flames, examine some of the most famous examples from around the world, and reveal how modern scientists are trying to reverse engineer these processes. We'll also dive into some of the more controversial aspects of this research, including government cover-ups, suppressed technologies, and the possibility that some of these eternal flames might not be natural phenomena at all, but evidence of advanced technologies left behind by previous civilizations. But what I'm most excited to share with you is the breakthrough discovery I made just last month while researching this video. I contacted Dr. Sarah Chen, a materials physicist at MIT who's been studying anomalous combustion for the past 15 years. What she told me in our 3-hour phone conversation completely shattered everything I thought I knew about fire and energy. She's been working on a classified project that involves replicating these eternal flame phenomena in laboratory conditions, and she's actually succeeded in creating flames that have been burning continuously for over 8 years now without any external fuel source. But here's the kicker. The energy output from these flames isn't just sustaining the combustion, it's actually producing more energy than what should be theoretically possible. Dr. Chen showed me data that indicates these flames are somehow converting virtual particles from quantum foam into real energy. I know that sounds absolutely insane, but the measurements are consistent across dozens of experiments, and multiple independent labs have replicated her results. When I asked her why this research isn't making headlines around the world, her answer sent chills down my spine. She told me that several researchers who tried to publish their findings publicly had their funding cut overnight. Their lab equipment was confiscated by federal agents, and they were essentially blacklisted from the scientific community. The implication is that someone doesn't want this technology becoming public knowledge. Now I want to show you something that's going to make your jaw drop. Remember that candle I mentioned from my grandmother? Well, I decided to do some investigating. I took it to a local chemistry lab and had them analyze the wax composition. What they found was impossible. The wax contains isotopes that don't occur naturally on Earth. Not only that, but the molecular structure of the wax is arranged in a pattern that shouldn't be stable under normal conditions. The lab technician who ran the tests called me back 3 days later, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. She said the wax was somehow reorganizing itself at the molecular level, constantly rebuilding its structure as it appeared to burn. It's like the candle is alive, constantly regenerating itself through some process that defies our understanding of chemistry and physics. This led me to research the history of my family's candle, and what I discovered was absolutely mind-blowing. The candle has been passed down through 7 generations of my family, and every single person who owned it reported the same thing. It never burns down, it never needs to be replaced, and it produces light that's somehow brighter and more soothing than any normal candle flame. But here's where it gets really interesting. I found a journal entry from my great-great-grandfather from 1874, where he describes acquiring the candle from a traveling merchant who claimed it came from a monastery in Tibet. The merchant told him that the candle was one of 13 created by monks who had discovered a way to capture and contain what they called the eternal flame of creation itself. This connects to something I discovered during my research into ancient civilizations. There are cave paintings in France that are over 30,000 years old that appear to depict people gathered around flames that have distinctive characteristics matching descriptions of eternal flames. These aren't just normal fire paintings. The flames in these cave paintings have unique spiral patterns and seem to be drawn with pigments that actually glow in certain light conditions. Archaeological evidence suggests that our ancestors might have had access to technologies or knowledge that we've lost. There are megalithic structures around the world that show evidence of having been built around eternal flame sites. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, and dozens of other ancient monuments all have chambers or areas that appear to have been designed to house continuously burning flames. What's even more fascinating is that many of these sites are aligned with specific astronomical events, and the eternal flames seem to respond to these alignments. During solar eclipses, equinoxes, and other celestial events, witnesses report that the flames change color, intensity, and even their physical properties. Some flames that normally burn upwards suddenly start burning horizontally or in spiral patterns during these events. I found a research paper from the 1930s where a team of archaeologists documented an eternal flame in a Mayan temple that had been burning continuously for over 600 years. During the summer solstice, this flame would turn bright blue and start burning cold. People could put their hands directly into the flame without being burned, and the flame would actually cool the surrounding air instead of heating it. The researchers were so intrigued that they set up permanent monitoring equipment and studied the flame for 3 years. Their measurements showed that during these cold-burning phases, the flame was actually absorbing heat energy from the environment and converting it into light through a process that violated the second law of thermodynamics. But then something terrible happened. In 1936, the research team disappeared overnight. Their equipment was found destroyed. Their research notes were gone, and the eternal flame had been extinguished for the first time in 6 centuries. Local indigenous people reported seeing military vehicles in the area around the time of the disappearance, but no official investigation was ever conducted. This pattern of suppression appears throughout the historical record. Whenever researchers get too close to understanding how eternal flames work, their research gets shut down, their funding disappears, or they simply vanish. It's like someone or something doesn't want humanity to rediscover this technology. Now here's something that's going to sound completely crazy, but I need you to hear me out. What if eternal flames aren't just natural phenomena or lost technologies? What if they're actually interdimensional portals or communication devices left behind by a more advanced civilization? I know how that sounds, but consider the evidence. These flames respond to astronomical events. They seem to tap into energy sources we can't detect, and they exhibit properties that shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of physics. Plus, many of the locations where eternal flames are found also have reports of unusual electromagnetic anomalies, unexplained aerial phenomena, and other strange occurrences. There's a researcher named Dr. Michael Harrison who's been investigating this connection for the past 20 years. He's documented over 200 cases where eternal flames are associated with what he calls temporal anomalies. People report experiencing missing time, seeing visions of past or future events, and having encounters with beings that don't appear to be entirely human. Dr. Harrison believes that eternal flames might be anchor points between our dimension and others, and that the continuous burning is actually a side effect of energy bleeding through from parallel realities. It sounds like pure science fiction, but his mathematical models are surprisingly robust, and he's made predictions about where new eternal flames should appear that have proven accurate in several cases. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from a case in Scotland from 2 years ago. A new eternal flame spontaneously appeared in an ancient stone circle, and within weeks, people in the area started reporting strange experiences. Time seemed to move differently near the flame. Electronic devices malfunctioned, and several witnesses claimed to see figures in ancient clothing moving around the stone circle at night. The British government quickly cordoned off the area and classified it as a military research site. But before they did, a local university team managed to take some measurements. The flame was burning at a temperature of over 3,000 degrees Celsius, but the stones around it remained completely cool. Even more bizarre, spectrographic analysis showed that the flame was burning elements that don't exist on the periodic table. This brings us to what might be the most important question of all. If these eternal flames really do represent some kind of advanced technology or interdimensional phenomenon, what does that mean for humanity's future? Are we on the verge of rediscovering knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of energy, consciousness, and reality itself? The answer might be closer than we think. Just last week, I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from someone claiming to be a former government researcher who had worked on a project called Operation Prometheus back in the 1980s. This person, who I'll call David for obvious reasons, told me he had been part of a team tasked with weaponizing eternal flame technology. According to David, the military had successfully created artificial eternal flames that could burn through any material known to man. These flames couldn't be extinguished by water, couldn't be smothered by removing oxygen, and would continue burning even in the vacuum of space. The implications for warfare were terrifying. Imagine bombs that create fires that literally cannot be put out, or weapons that could melt through the strongest bunkers and keep burning indefinitely. But here's where David's story gets really disturbing. He claims the research was shut down not because of ethical concerns, but because the flames started exhibiting intelligent behavior. They would move in coordinated patterns, respond to human thoughts, and in some cases actually communicate by changing color and intensity in what appeared to be a form of Morse code. The research team became convinced they had accidentally made contact with some form of non-human intelligence that existed within or behind these eternal flames. The final straw came when one of the artificial flames started predicting future events with perfect accuracy. It would flicker in specific patterns that, when decoded, revealed detailed information about stock market crashes, natural disasters, and political events that hadn't happened yet but always came true exactly as predicted. David told me that on the day the project was terminated, all the artificial eternal flames suddenly went out simultaneously, despite being in separate facilities hundreds of miles apart. But before they died, each flame burned a message into the metal surfaces of their containment units. The same message appeared in all locations, written in symbols that none of the researchers could identify, but that somehow conveyed a clear meaning to anyone who looked at them. The message was simple but terrifying. "We are coming home." Now, I have to tell you, when David first contacted me, I thought he was just another conspiracy theorist with too much time on his hands. But then he sent me photographs. Blurry, low-resolution images that looked like they were taken with ancient surveillance equipment. But what they showed was unmistakable. Flames burning in perfect geometric patterns, creating symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. More importantly, he sent me coordinates, locations where he claimed some of the original research sites were located. I decided to investigate one of them, an abandoned facility in the Nevada desert that supposedly housed Project Prometheus from 1983 to 1987. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about this whole phenomenon. The facility was mostly destroyed, but in the basement I discovered a room with scorch marks on the walls that formed the same symbols David had shown me in his photographs. But here's the kicker. The scorch marks were still warm to the touch, even though the facility had been abandoned for over 30 years. In the center of the room was a circular depression in the concrete floor about 3 feet across, and it was filled with a substance I'd never seen before. It looked like liquid metal, but it was moving on its own, swirling in patterns that reminded me of the flame movements David had described. When I got close to it, I could feel heat radiating from the substance, and I swear I could hear something like whispers coming from it. I managed to collect a small sample of the liquid metal substance, and when I got it analyzed, the results were absolutely mind-blowing. The substance contained elements with atomic numbers higher than anything on the periodic table, arranged in crystalline structures that shouldn't be able to exist in our reality. But somehow they were stable, and they were generating energy at a rate that defied every law of physics I'd ever learned. The lab technician who analyzed my sample called me back within hours, and she was clearly shaken. She told me that the substance had started reacting to the analysis equipment in ways that seemed almost purposeful. It would change its molecular structure in response to different tests, as if it was trying to communicate through chemistry itself. But the most disturbing part was what happened when they tried to dispose of the sample. No matter what they did to it, heating it, freezing it, exposing it to acid, radiation, or electromagnetic fields, the substance remained completely unchanged. It was as if it existed outside the normal rules that govern matter in our universe. This discovery led me to reach out to other researchers who might have encountered similar phenomena. What I found was a hidden network of scientists, historians, and investigators who have been quietly studying eternal flames and related anomalies for decades. They call themselves the Prometheus Group, and they've been documenting cases that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the politician but a quantum physicist at Stanford, has been part of this group for 15 years. She told me about experiments she's conducted that prove eternal flames are somehow connected to what she calls the zero-point energy field, the quantum foam that exists at the most fundamental level of reality. According to Dr. Warren's research, eternal flames aren't just burning fuel in the traditional sense. They're actually creating tiny tears in the fabric of space-time itself, allowing energy from parallel dimensions to bleed through into our reality. The continuous burning is just a side effect of this interdimensional energy transfer. She showed me mathematical models that predict where these tears should occur based on gravitational anomalies, magnetic field fluctuations, and even lunar cycles. Her predictions have been accurate in over 90% of cases where new eternal flames have appeared in recent years. But here's what really got my attention. Dr. Warren believes that the increase in eternal flame sightings over the past decade isn't random. She thinks something is causing the barriers between dimensions to weaken. And these flames are early warning signs of a much larger phenomenon that's approaching. Her calculations suggest that we're heading toward what she calls a convergence event, where the barriers between realities become so thin that interdimensional travel becomes not just possible but inevitable. The eternal flames, according to her theory, are beacons being placed by intelligences from other dimensions to mark safe crossing points for when this convergence occurs. I know this sounds absolutely insane, but the evidence is becoming impossible to ignore. Reports of eternal flame sightings have increased by over 300% in the last 5 years. These aren't just isolated incidents in remote locations anymore. Eternal flames are appearing in major cities, in people's homes, and in places where they have no historical precedent. Just 3 months ago, an eternal flame appeared in the middle of Times Square in New York City. It burned for 6 hours before authorities managed to contain it. But during those 6 hours, thousands of people witnessed something that shouldn't exist. Videos went viral on social media before they were systematically removed, and witnesses reported that looking into the flame gave them visions of other worlds, other versions of Earth where history had unfolded differently. The official explanation was that it was some kind of gas leak that created an unusual combustion effect. But I spoke to several witnesses who were there. They all described the same thing, a flame that seemed alive, that responded to the crowd around it, and that showed them glimpses of realities beyond our own. One witness, a street performer named Marcus, told me that when he looked into the flame, he saw himself performing in what looked like the same location. But in a world where the buildings were different, the people wore different clothes, and the sky had two suns. He said the vision was so vivid and detailed that it felt more real than his actual memories. Another witness, a businesswoman named Sarah, reported seeing a version of New York where the city was built vertically into the clouds with massive towers that seemed to stretch into space itself. She said she could hear music coming from the flame, beautiful and haunting melodies that she'd never heard before but somehow knew by heart. These reports are consistent with what Dr. Warren's research predicts. If eternal flames really are windows between dimensions, then it makes sense that people would see alternate versions of reality when they look into them. But what's really concerning is that these visions seem to be becoming more frequent and more intense. The Prometheus group has documented over 2,000 cases of people having interdimensional experiences near eternal flames. Some report meeting alternate versions of themselves. Others claim to have received messages from beings in other realities. And a few have allegedly been able to physically cross over into other dimensions temporarily. But here's where things get really scary. According to the group's research, something is coming through in the other direction as well. There have been reports of entities, beings, or intelligences that don't belong in our reality appearing near eternal flame sites. Most of these encounters are brief and relatively harmless, but some have been genuinely terrifying. Dr. Harrison, the researcher I mentioned earlier, documented a case in Oregon where an eternal flame appeared near a small town. And within weeks, residents started reporting encounters with figures that looked human but weren't quite right. These beings would appear at night, always near the eternal flame, and they seemed to be studying the local population. The encounters escalated over several months until one night a local resident named Tom Bradley decided to approach one of these figures directly. According to his testimony, the being communicated with him telepathically, explaining that they were explorers from a dimension where eternal flames had always existed, and they were investigating why the barriers between worlds were breaking down. The being told Tom that something was causing reality itself to become unstable, and that the increasing number of eternal flames was both a symptom of this instability and an attempt by various interdimensional civilizations to establish communication networks before a complete dimensional collapse occurred. Tom's story might sound like pure fantasy, but here's the thing that makes it credible. He provided specific information about physics and dimensional theory that he couldn't possibly have known. When Dr. Harrison checked Tom's claims against cutting-edge research in quantum mechanics and string theory, everything matched up perfectly. This suggests that either Tom is one of the most brilliant theoretical physicists on the planet who's been hiding his knowledge, or he really did receive information from an interdimensional intelligence that understands the nature of reality better than we do. The implications are staggering. If these entities are telling the truth, then eternal flames aren't just curiosities or lost technologies. Their emergency communication systems being deployed by advanced civilizations who are trying to coordinate a response to a crisis that threatens the stability of all realities. And if that's the case, then we need to start taking this phenomenon a lot more seriously. Because according to the information Tom received, we don't have much time left before whatever is causing this dimensional instability reaches a critical point. The being told Tom that we have approximately 18 months before what they called the Great Convergence occurs. This is when the dimensional barriers become so thin that travel between realities becomes uncontrolled and chaotic. Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding that your house exists in 3 different dimensions simultaneously, with different versions of your family living in each one. But here's what really terrified me about Tom's account. The interdimensional being warned him that not all the civilizations trying to cross over are friendly. Some come from realities where they've exhausted their resources and are looking for new worlds to colonize. Others are fleeing from something even worse. Something that's been consuming entire dimensions one by one. According to this entity, eternal flames serve as both gateways and warning systems. The ones that burn cold are safe passage points established by benevolent civilizations. But the ones that burn hot, the ones that can't be approached without protection, those are being created by the hostile forces as invasion beacons. I started checking reports of eternal flames around the world, categorizing them by temperature and behavior patterns. What I discovered made my stomach drop. Over 60% of the new eternal flames appearing in the last year have been the hot, aggressive type. If Tom's source is correct, we're looking at a potential interdimensional invasion that most of humanity doesn't even know is coming. This led me to make the most terrifying discovery of my entire investigation. Remember my grandmother's candle, the one with the impossible wax composition? I decided to test its temperature more carefully, and what I found changed everything. The flame burns at exactly 37 degrees Celsius. That's human body temperature. This isn't a coincidence. When I researched the 13 candles mentioned in my great-great-grandfather's journal, I found records of similar candles appearing throughout history, always during times of great upheaval or dimensional instability. They show up before major historical events like plagues, wars, and natural disasters, as if they're being placed strategically by someone who knows what's coming. The more I investigated, the more I realized that my family might have been chosen as guardians of one of these dimensional monitoring devices. Each generation has been unknowingly protecting and maintaining a piece of technology that's been tracking interdimensional activity for over a century. But here's the most chilling part. 3 days ago, my grandmother's candle started behaving differently. The flame began flickering in patterns I'd never seen before, and the wax around the base started forming symbols that matched the ones I'd found in the Nevada facility. When I showed these symbols to Dr. Warren, her face went pale. She told me that according to her calculations, these symbols represent a countdown. The candle isn't just monitoring dimensional activity anymore. It's preparing for something. The patterns indicate that whatever the interdimensional beings have been warning about is accelerating faster than anyone expected. We might not have 18 months left, we might only have weeks. So what does this mean for you, for all of us? If even half of what I've uncovered is true, we're standing at the threshold of the most significant event in human history. The Age of Eternal Flames isn't just some fascinating mystery from our past. It's the beginning of our future, whether we're ready for it or not. The candle that never dies isn't just defying the laws of physics. It's serving as a lighthouse in an ocean of realities, guiding us toward a destiny we never saw coming. And the flame that burns eternal might be the only thing standing between our world and complete dimensional chaos. The next time you see a candle flame dancing in the darkness, remember this. You might not just be looking at a simple fire. You might be witnessing a beacon from another reality, a message from beings beyond our understanding, or a warning that time is running out faster than we ever imagined. The eternal flame burns on, counting down to a moment when everything we think we know about reality will change forever.